I'm excited for our conversation today, y'all. And we are streaming.
I know. It's going to be a good one.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Not Today. I'm Jorge Altiaga.
And my name is Emily May. We are leaders at Right to Be, and we are so glad that you guys are joining us for this conversation.
Yeah, so this space is about pausing in the middle of heavy moments, which it feels like there's so many of all the time, and asking, how do we respond with humanity? How do we show up for each other? And how do we turn care into action?
And we call this podcast Not Today because sometimes you just got to come straight up the middle and say it like it is. And today we are saying, Not today, AAPI hate.
Yes. And so each episode, we focus on what's happening right now in our communities, and we leave you with tools that you can actually use when you finish with your time with us today.
We are so honored to be joined by two incredible leaders that we have known for years now, doing critical work to support AAPI communities across the country. We are joined by Christina Yang from Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Southern California, and Marita Etcubañez from Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. Both of their organizations have been at the forefront of advocacy, legal protection, and community response for AAPI communities. So thank you both for being here. Before we dive in, let's do a news roundup to really ground our discussion today. So, news roundup. All right, here we go. So, over the past few years, we've actually seen sustained levels of anti-AAPI hate across the United States, not just as isolated incidents, but truly a widespread experience. And in 2025, a national report from Stop AAPI Hate found that over half, 53% of Asian American and Pacific Islander adults experienced some form of hate in 2024, including things like harassment, discrimination, or violence.
And that number is even higher for younger people, as you can imagine. Nearly 3 in 4 AAPI young adults reported experiencing hate. So when we talk about this issue, we're not talking about something rare. We're talking about something that's shaping everyday life.
And like with all forms of hate, a lot of people are not reporting what's actually happening to them. So, in some communities, studies show that a vast majority of these instances are going unreported because people feel like nothing's going to change, nobody's going to listen to me, or sometimes they'll even think, well, that wasn't serious enough, right, to cause change,
Mhm.
even though they know in their hearts that it's serious enough to cause harm.
Yeah, yeah. And in some cases, I know for myself, the folks in my family are just like, it's you just gotta grow a thick skin, like keep it moving. And even when official data shows a slight decline in hate crimes, the bigger picture tells a different story, all right? Recent analysis of FBI data shows that anti-Asian hate crimes remain significantly higher than they were before the pandemic, and that underreporting continues to mask the full scale of harm that's taking place.
And we're seeing shifts in how this is showing up too. So, a 2026 study, very, very recent, found that 44% of Asian Americans report feeling worried about their lives right now. Part of that is pointing towards ongoing anxiety towards discrimination, public rhetoric, and also this global tensions that we're in, this global dynamic, and these wars that we're in as well.
And there's also the role of online hate. So research has shown that anti-Asian hate speech and threats spike during political and global tensions, often fueling real-world harm.
So here's what it is, like here's let's put the cheese on the cracker for this. I think
Mhm.
that even as visible incidences are fluctuating, the broader environment for the Asian American community is that fear, discrimination, and exclusion remains very, very real.
Hmm. And historically, this follows a pattern. Moments of crisis, whether it's economic, political, or global conflict, often lead to Asian communities being scapegoated or treated as outsiders.
So today we're going to ask, like, what's really happening beneath the surface? What does safety actually look like? And how do we respond in ways that protect dignity for everyone?
And so, with that, let's get into it and talk to our longtime partners, amazing colleagues, friends at this point, because we've worked together for so long. Christina and Marita, if y'all can, the work that your organizations are doing is critical, right? And so if you could share more about, yourself, the work that both organizations are doing, and then sort of what called you or compelled you to step into that work. And we'll want to start with Christina and then hand it over to Maria.
Right. Thank you so much, Emily and Jorge, for having us on this exciting conversation opportunity. It's really fitting because it's May already somehow, which means that it's Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And of course, for me and Marita, that's year round, obviously, but there's a lot more activity and events and advocacy opportunities going on. So, really excited to have this opportunity to take this particular lens onto our work. I am at a civil rights and social justice nonprofit called Asian Americans Advancing Justice Southern California. We are based in both LA and Orange counties and focused on serving and advocating on behalf of AAPI community members in a variety of strategy areas. We have direct legal services. We have free Asian language hotlines for folks to call into to get help from us or get referrals to partner organizations and other resources. We do policy advocacy. There's a data disaggregation aspect of our work as well, health access, the list goes on. And anti-hate work has always been part of the fabric of our work over the past 4+ decades, but certainly during COVID, when I learned from Marita and AAJC that there was this really great partnership going on with Right to Be to bring a really tangible resource like bystander intervention through an anti-AAPI hate lens to the community through a virtual platform, since we were not able to gather together at that time. It was a really amazing opportunity to be part of that moment, to provide something that was really useful in a meaningful way. And I'm really glad that we've been able to carry it on even kind of post-COVID. Now we're seeing anti-Asian hate take a different shape that's maybe a little bit less like what we saw 4 or 5 years ago. But as you were saying, Jorge and Emily, it's still really a huge part, unfortunately, of the need that we see in the community. And I know AAJC has been doing a lot of great work in that space as well. So I'll hand it over to my friend Marita.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you also, Jorge and Emily, for bringing us on today. Um, so something that not a lot of people might not know is that my organization, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, was founded by a number of organizations, including Christina's organization, now AJ SoCal, but back in the day, the Asian Pacific American Legal Center. So the leaders of AJ SoCal and a few other organizations felt that it was necessary for the Asian American community to have a voice in Washington, D.C. that could focus on federal policy advocacy and advocate for the needs of our community with the federal government. So they founded what is now Advancing Justice AAJC in 1991. We're celebrating our 35th anniversary this year, which is exciting. And similar to what Christina shared, we've long advocated on civil rights issues important to our community, like voting rights, immigration, and we continue working on these issues and, in the intervening years have since expanded to include work on anti-Asian hate and discrimination, education policy, tech telecom, and we have staff whose work is focused on litigation, research, and community engagement, but policy advocacy is still core to our work. And like so many organizations serving our community, we had to lean in and deepen our engagement on addressing harassment and discrimination during the pandemic when we all saw this surge in anti-Asian hate. We knew our communities were hurting, and that we needed support on how to address, heal from, and prevent hate crimes and hate incidents. So I'm still tremendously grateful that we embarked on this partnership with you all at Right to Be. As Christina shared, it felt really important to be able to be entering into this work with something positive, something proactive and practical, that people could do to push back against hate and discrimination and also demonstrate care for one another. So I am really glad that we are continuing to do this work because, as we know, the pandemic may have faded away, but the need is still there. Um, People continue to act on all kinds of misguided beliefs, right? That on these ideas that people from our community don't belong or shouldn't be accepted as fully American. And we know that's not the case. We know that we're resilient. And when it feels like it does right now, that we are beset by challenges on all sides, it's always helpful to be reminded that we are working together, that we are resilient. And I'm really grateful to be in community working with folks like you and others that are dedicated to this work.
Yeah, I remember, like March 2020, right? And I'm like, hey, Marita, right? We got this thing. Is it helpful? Because we're watching what's going on with anti-Asian hate, and we thought maybe it could be useful. If not, and then we just built and we grew from there. And and we've trained well over 250,000, probably more than that at this point, people in bystander intervention to stop AAPI hate. I'm curious to hear from you. It's been 6 years and two
Mhm.
months since I made that first phone call. How have the needs changed over the past 6 years for, the Asian American community? Obviously, we're still seeing significantly high rates of hate and
Mhm.
harassment, discrimination, but what's different? What's different?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, I think we know that a lot of these attacks are sort of all coming from this same idea that Asian Americans somehow don't really belong in the
Hmm.
United
Hmm.
States,
Yeah.
right? And we are seeing that manifest in a lot of different ways. It might not be trying to find someone to blame for the pandemic anymore, but all of these attacks on immigrant
Yeah.
communities, so many in our communities are reeling from that. Um, these ideas about economic competition and sort of
Yeah.
geopolitical issues are harming our communities as folks are continuing to look for people they can cast as enemies, right? So we are always on the, you know, on the lookout and working to respond to sort of this inflammatory anti-China sentiment or sort of racist attacks against people from different parts of the world. So it's manifesting in a lot of different and harmful ways, but I think we recognize that it's all still coming from the same place, trying to find someone to blame. Um, and we cannot and should not tolerate that.
Yeah, exactly, Marita. I think too, since January 2025, let's just be transparent about that. We are again in a situation where we have folks in the White House that are going to say whatever comes to mind, God help us. And that does have an impact on how people in our communities may feel emboldened to say or treat other people that they perceive as foreign or different. And it's no different from, Vincent Chin 40 plus years ago. It's that same thing that Marita was referencing around economic competition and like jobs are going away. There's a lot of different pressures, I think, financially for families all across the country. And sometimes those tensions are going to come out in a way that's really harmful to API communities.
Thank you for sharing that. It's definitely uh I'd say a shift, and technology of course doesn't help things either, right? That and all the misinformation and disinformation, all the stuff. But when people hear the term API hate, I've often, spoken to folks and they've thought about it as like isolated incidents, but we know that they're not isolated incidents. To your point, Marita, that they become this broader, just like narrative that shows up in the media and then all the way in your community. So, what do you wish more people, understood about what's happening right now? And then I think not just hanging out in the problem, then from a solution aspect, what does support actually look like in practice?
So, right, we know that hate can show up in a lot of different ways, and we've talked about some of this. And with so much that's happening right now, I feel like we all are feel like we're living through like chaos and all kinds of, you turn on the news every day and you don't know what fresh horror, is has transpired. It's really hard and it's easy to get overwhelmed. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is about how those in power are, it feels like they're really trying to bring us back to a vision of America where only a privileged few, right, really belong and are the ones that get to make the decisions. Um, the gains that were hard won through the civil rights movement are under attack. They're being eroded every day. And we really have to counter this, right? And as someone who's operating inside DC, I can say we need to do this through the courts, through legislation, through elections. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of this work really requires us to advance a vision of this country, the vision that we believe in, right? Where belonging isn't dependent on being part of any particular identity group, um, but to create the conditions where we are all valued, where we all can feel safe and know that we belong.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And, another piece of this too is that we say AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander, and that is just like a huge umbrella. We've got people from so many countries under that umbrella. We've got immigrants, we've got children, we've got elders, we've got LGBTQ folks. I mean, you name it, right? How are people inside of this umbrella? How are folks handling this differently? Like, what does it mean for different, people in this moment to identify as AAPI?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Emily. I mean, I think definitely the diversity of our API communities are, I think, just a really big part of our day in and day out, how we serve and show up for the community, because there are so many different needs across the API umbrella, and they're not always the most visible or obvious. So I think that's where we want to make sure, for example, that the ways that we're out in the community are accessible to different parts of the community. I'm thinking, for example, of how we have done some of our trainings in person as opposed to virtually, just because we already know, the senior citizens in Chinatown, like they're not going to get on a Zoom. They may not have that internet technology available to them. They may not have the ability to navigate the devices that would help them get online. So having, once it was safe to have trainings back in person again, to continue a more hybrid approach of getting the resources out in the community. And that also meant, I remember having conversations with Jorge about how can we adapt some of the interactive and like polling options, in an in-person setting, as opposed to through the way that we most are used to doing them through Zoom. And just being, I think, open to the ways that our communities need to be communicated with, and how they might be reaching out to us, whether that's is it through an online form, or is it through reaching someone on a phone call, which I'm like, do some of our young staff actually know how to make phone calls these days, as opposed to sending a text message. So we're just trying to make sure that we're getting out there in as many ways as we can, especially since we do have that direct services component of our work as well. Yeah.
And if I can add to that, I think another component that I know Christina is well versed on is that as diverse as our communities are, this means we speak a lot of different languages,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so one of the things that I'm really proud of through this training is that we have been working with a number of community organizations in different parts of the country that are now offering this training in different Asian languages, being the languages spoken by refugee communities, as well as the larger language groups that are spoken by our communities. So I think that's one thing we have been doing to try to make this training more accessible to, I think it's fair to say the more vulnerable folks in our community, right? Particularly the elders, people who might not speak English well.
I'm curious. I'm gonna go slightly off script here, y'all, but I'm curious. There's kind of not an after, because we're still in it, right? The partnership is ongoing, but I feel like there's very clear before and after, in terms of like when we first started to offer the training, and now that we've served so like hundreds of thousands of people, right, with the training. So like, what has been one, maybe more than one, but a glaring difference? Have you seen anything in the communities that you've, provided the bystander intervention, or how to respond and practice resilience work? Has it been a change over the last, 6 years of our partnership and doing this work.
I think talking to a lot of the organizations that we have more recently brought into this work they're holding a training for a group of, say, Hmong elders, right? Or I think the way that they are talking about these issues is very differently. Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of folks in our community, particularly newcomers, might not necessarily feel that they don't have any expectation of getting help in the language they need. Don't necessarily feel like they're in a position to demand services and assistance in the same way that perhaps someone who grew up here and is able to navigate systems does. And one of the things we've heard from the community groups that have been doing this training is it's really they've had really good conversations with folks about harassment and discrimination, that it's not just when someone is yelling at you telling you to go back to your country that is harassment and discrimination, but this idea that people don't need to expect to be able to get the help that they need, right? This is something we can work on too. And I think being able to have not just the virtual training, but really engage and have these conversations being brought together by the training, I think is a really positive outgrowth. And it's something we want to continue finding the space to have these conversations so that folks really understand that we should be able to get the help that we need, and that we can all have a voice in advocating for the type of safety and civil rights that will serve us all.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for most people, most communities, to receive care, right? Like, and that's ultimately what bystander intervention is. It's the idea that you are offering care. But how do we receive care in a way that doesn't mean that we're weak or vulnerable or victims or unable to take care of ourselves, right? How do we receive care just as a little bit of love, a wish, right, through the sky for us, just because we all deserve care, not because there's anything wrong or faulty with us. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that too, right? That idea that we all deserve care in the same way that we all can take care of each other. Those are two sides of a coin that both need to be sorted out. What do you all feel like is one misconception about AAPI hate, or the work to address hate and harassment in the Asian American community? What's one thing that like some people really get wrong and that kind of holds them back from doing more?
I mean, I just want to piggyback off a theme that Marita touched on, which is, how does anti-Asian hate or harassment look now as opposed to, Kung flu, Wuhan virus type stuff that we were so focused on 5, 6 years ago? I think the examples that we see, coming into our hotlines or into AAJC's Stand Against Hate Tracker, they're not in that same exact mold, but they're no less harmful. Even if people don't feel physically threatened, let's say, they can still feel less than or belittled. And then to your point, Emily, like it stays with them. People are trying to figure out if it's okay to feel bad about the way that someone else's kind of throwaway comment made them feel in that moment, that what I like to call like Monday morning quarterbacking. And I think what's maybe not the most intuitive to folks who are looking to be allies in this space is that being aware of the different ways that anti-Asian hate and harassment can look, and then that equips folks to be supportive and be available in the way that the person who experienced it really needs. Like maybe they're not able to receive that care in that moment, but 24 hours later, they might be looking to receive that care. And then so to kind of be aware of like ways that folks can circle back that maybe aren't super immediate and not direct, if you will, but still really valuable and useful, especially if it's not expected. I think that can be really special. And I think that that's something to really take away. Yeah.
That's great. I think this is like a perfect transition, right? I think one, folks knowing what's available to them and ways that they can show up for people, during and after. And also knowing that, it's okay to feel fear, right? Often there's a fear about doing the wrong thing or making things worse. But we want to move ourselves to a place where we're able to balance that fear with the need to be able to like show up for one another and for ourselves ultimately, right? And so we know that tools is the game here, not just ideas, and that, awareness matters because, what we do in the moment and after is actually what's going to shift the culture. And so we talked about these trainings that we've done together. And so, right, to be partnered with Advancing Justice AJC, and then later on, of course, Southern California and Chicago on our bystander intervention. But we also partnered on a curriculum, how to respond and how to respond to harassment when you experience it and practice resilience, right? And it really comes down to three core strategies that we tell people, right? So the first is trust your instincts, okay? And this might sound simple, but it's actually the most important piece because in moments of harassment, people often freeze trying to figure out like what's the right thing to do. Okay. The real question is, am I safe? Right? Your body's constantly giving you information. So before anything else, we want people to pause and assess what's happening around me. Is the situation escalating? Do I have an exit? Is there someone nearby who can help me if I need it? And then based off of that decision, you decide what's possible for you in the moment. Because the truth is that there's no perfect response to harassment, but there is a priority. Your safety comes first. Once you've done that, the next step is to choose. You can decide whether or not you want to reclaim your space, right? That's deciding, do I want to respond and how do I want to respond? There's a few ways this can look in practice. So you can speak up, you can set a boundary clearly and directly. And that might sound something like, please leave me alone. That's not appropriate. This conversation's over. The goal isn't to win an argument, it's to name a behavior and get it to stop. You can choose to get help, right? You don't have to do this alone. So you can turn to someone nearby. It could be a bystander, I don't know, a staff member. Maybe you're at a grocery store, right? You go to the person at the counter, someone in authority, and say, hey, I need your help. Can you help me? Right? Even that small moment can shift an entire situation. And then we encourage people if it feels within, your capacity, and of course, we want you to be safe. Think about, documenting what's happening to you. You can record, take notes, or take a screenshot of what's happening safely without having to escalate the situation. Because in a world where people are often told they're overreacting, documentation can make that harm visible, right? Especially for communities of color, which we know oftentimes kind of our experiences get minimized, right? And just to be really clear, you don't have to do any of these, okay? Walking away is also a response, and it might be the right one for you in that moment. And silence can be safety. Now, the third step is what happens after, because harassment doesn't end when the moment ends, right? Or it stays with you, it stays in your body, right? And we want you to be able to process that because this is really important. Harassment is never your fault. And it's not your responsibility to have the perfect response, right? So we really want you to think about practicing resilience. Resilience is about how we take care of ourselves after something harmful happens. That can look like taking a breath, grounding yourself, naming what you're feeling without judgment, talking to someone you trust, moving your body, walking, dancing, releasing some tension, or maybe you just need a rest, take a nap, right? And resilience isn't just individual, it's collective. It happens in our relationships, in our communities, and in the ways we show up for each other. So, but it starts with one simple thing, right? Acknowledging that what happened to you in that moment mattered. So when we bring it all together, right? We trust your instincts, reclaim your space, totally optional. Practice resilience. This isn't about being perfect. It's not about being a hero. It's about reducing harm and making sure people don't have to go through it alone. So we're gonna go and transition over and really talk about what's giving us hope in this moment. So Christina, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I would just say one thing we've been saying around the AJ SoCal office recently is that joy is resilience. And, especially I feel like last year, 2025, was just, there was a lot of anxiety and fear in the progressive nonprofit community. Like Jorge and Emily putting together the Ally Solidarity Network for us, I think was so valuable to like lean on others who understood what each day and each moment felt like. But this year in 2026, like as Marita was saying, there's still a lot happening, shall we say, but I do feel like we're all more resilient in a way because we know we survived 2025, so we can keep doing this thing. But also just to understand and realize that, you know, that reclaiming joy, reclaiming happiness in the work that we do and in the way we serve the community, like that's our own way of resisting against all the bad things that are happening. And these things can exist at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So I would say that that's giving me a lot of hope right now.
Thank you, Christina. I was going to say something similar. For me, it's community that really brings me hope. And I need that constant reminder that finding joy is a form of resilience and is a form of, we can find joy through building community and being in community. And I need to hold on to that,
Yeah.
especially right now. And so, yeah, it is our communities and their resilience that bring me hope.
I was gonna say the same thing. Oh, I was gonna link it to weather, right? Because it is just now in Brooklyn. It is 70 degrees and sunny outside, and Brooklyn just becomes this magical place in the spring when it's 70 and sunny. It's like somebody, shows a shoulder blade, right, to their tank top, and all of a sudden everybody's like out on the street. And I felt like, we've fortified so many of our progressive communities over the past year and a half. But it's also just gorgeous to fortify like your little lived community, like the guy down the street. And spring does that for me. It's like this manifestation of everything that's right and fresh and new and colorful in the world. So I'm feeling it. All right.
To be honest with you, kind of sticking in the but like spring, and watching all the flowers bloom and the trees come in. There's just something, the hope in that like there's renewal,
Yeah.
that things are constantly growing, that everything is a cycle. And so it just brings me hope, right? That whatever moment comes next, that too shall pass, right? And that it's all part of a cycle. And I think it's Lawanda, one of our former board vice
I was
chair
just
and
gonna throw that
Emily's
quote in.
mentor. Yeah,
Yeah.
that what is it, Emily? What did she say?
After the forest fire, the greenest things grow.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that is, it feels a little bit just symbolic of this overall moment. Like I
Yeah.
can't really tell what's growing that's green right now, but I feel really confident that it's coming.
Amazing.
I don't
Yeah,
know what flower that is. I don't know what's
You're just
happening,
kidding.
but
yeah,
I feel like we got some seeds. We got some
Yeah.
mhm,
seeds planted,
for sure, for
and
sure.
it's coming.
Love it.
Sure. Well, Christina, Marita, thank you so much for joining us today. If today's conversation resonated with the folks who got a minute to, chat with us, please consider following us, sharing this. It's available on our YouTube channel, as well as we are officially on Spotify and the Apple Store as a podcast. So please go and check us out. And you can learn about or work together, or if you want to learn more about Advancing Justice SoCal or Advancing Justice AAJC, we'll be dropping some links, some information on our socials. So please go and check it out. And the series is called Not Today because harm may be real, but silence doesn't get the final word.
That's right. And we've got your back. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.